we used to have a company that promoted and marketed Canadian education to attract students to come and study in Canada, so Brazilian students to come and study in Canada. And we had offices all around the world that were built to do that. And we went to them and said, what else could we do to promote Canadian education that would be within our mandate, but would also be something that would be good for the countries that we're in. At that time we had managers overseas who were women in their mid-30s with young kids, and they said, you know what would be really great would be a Canadian style preschool. And that's how the idea came about. At the preschool level, which is up until really NO1 in the Brazilian system, the focus is on immersion, so the kids are learning in English. So they're not just learning English, but they're learning in English. So we have a curriculum that's fully laid out that tells what the learning objectives are for the students all through that. But the critical thing is that it is learning by experience. It's learning by doing things. It's learning by activities, because that's how young children learn. They don't learn by you just talking at them and telling them what something is. They learn by touching and feeling and by actually doing things. And so if you go into Maple Bear Classroom, that's what you see. You see kids learning by doing activities. When we move to the elementary school level, we are working on developing critical thinking skills. So it's not just enough to know what words are, but how to use words. It's not just enough to know multiplication, but how do you manipulate numbers? How do you work? So we work on developing critical thinking skills, and that's really the crucial part. Because in Brazil, for example, parents are always worried about how's my kid going to do on the tests, right? Because Brazil's a very test-oriented place. Our children learn the critical thinking skills that they will do well on any test, because they know how to think about it. Well, in Brazil, of course, the teaching methodology is fairly traditional. So you have a teacher at the front of the room, you have kids sitting in chairs or desks in rows in front of the teacher, and the teacher really talks at the students. So it's a teacher-oriented system. What we have is a student-oriented system where the teacher is a mentor, the teacher is a coach, the teacher is not the center of attention, the student is the center of attention. And I think if there was one thing that you'd want to change, it would be that. And in fact, we know that that's what the Brazilian Ministry of Education wants to do, but it's hard. Big country, a lot of systems, so it takes time for that change to take place, because that's what they are now saying that they would like to do. The other thing is to invest in education, and again, we understand that the Brazilian government has made commitments to make the investment in education. For example, I understand they're planning to use the revenue from the pre-salt oil for education. So, investment in education, you have to build good schools, you have to develop good teachers. All of those things are also critical to good results in education. To a certain degree we had to adapt, but in other ways we didn't have to adapt, because certainly at the preschool level the core learning is the same in all countries. Once we get to the elementary level, we have to go to a bilingual format because we have to conform, for example, as we do in Brazil, with the local Ministry of Education requirements. And so the curriculum is integrated. We have both a Canadian methodology and a Brazilian curriculum. So we have to adapt to meet the requirements of the Canadian or the Brazilian Ministry of Education. And we also have to obviously teach in not only English, but in the local language. So for example, in Brazil, we're fully bilingual, so it's English and Portuguese. And what we tend to do is to teach English language arts, obviously in English, math and science in English, and the other subjects are in Portuguese or whatever the language of the country is. One is we make a very big investment in education. So it's a very big portion of a budget both at the federal level of government and the provincial level of government, there's a lot of investment in education. Two, we have a lot of emphasis on training and the quality of the teachers, and we pay them pretty well too, so it's an attractive profession for people to go into, so you get a very professional, competent teaching and administrative staff. And three, we've spent a lot of time on researching education and how to achieve good outcomes, particularly in an immersion format and in second languages. And essentially those are all of the things that we bring in with Maple Bear, is an emphasis on quality, an emphasis on training and professional staff, and an emphasis on the very latest in terms of what are considered good educational practices.